So I am
Huh?
here with Kate Stone, who is an educator and has taught all over the world, most recently as a Princeton teaching fellow in Asia, which is super cool. And Kate is also a college essay writing expert. She helps teenagers with their college essay writing, which is a business that she still runs. But we're going to talk to her today about a different business, which sort of came out of that essay writing work that she's been doing. And it makes a lot of sense, right? If you think about it, a college essay is an introspective process. And what Kate found when she was working with teens on this is that it wasn't super easy for them to kind of get in touch with their inner feelings, and they needed a bit of social, emotional guidance and support. And so out of that, Kate started coaching teens, and in particular, young women, and giving them some support, either individually one-on-one as a coach, or also through a multi-week program that she runs called HeartSpeak. So we're going to kind of dive into that with her and sort of learn about this as a potential, something that Cicero clients might be interested in. So Kate, first of all, thanks for taking time out to chat with me. And I was thinking maybe we could just kind of, thanks. I think we could maybe just dive right in with the sort of the most basic question that I have, which is, what is a teen life coach? And maybe you can contrast that with like versus a learning coach, and maybe also kind of talk a little bit about why a kid might need something like this.
That's a really great question, actually. The perspective I'm coming from is that, the unspoken rule when we transition into adulthood and we start looking for our first jobs and our first career and thinking about what career we want to enter. And it goes and applies to Harvard admissions too. We learned that the most important thing that anybody is really looking for is that somebody has been on a personal development journey, that they've done some form of self-inquiry or self-examination that has imbued them with a resiliency, a mental health stability, something that makes them much more efficient at life, at functioning in the outer world. And I think school has this massive gap where we teach all the traditional subjects, but we don't actually teach them how to examine their value system, identify what their strengths are, identify what their fears and challenges and struggles are, and then how to navigate that. So a lot of my students are just suffering in silence. They're struggling in secret. They don't have, there's no framework, there's no container, there's no avenue for them to go, I'm feeling this way, what do I do about it? So like you said, I do a lot of college essay workshops, and I usually do them in a pair of three. And the first one is essentially like a vulnerability workshop. It's like we go deep into like, and I demonstrate it. Like for me, sorry about that. For me, I demonstrate what it means to be vulnerable, to go deep within. And the more vulnerable I go, the more vulnerable they're willing to go. I even had a student the other day go, I said, I demonstrated an exercise, and they were like, whoa, that was deep, because they're not used to seeing that. They're not even used to seeing in our parents. And how do they know how to navigate their inner world if we're not demonstrating what it's like to address our challenges directly? And so the program that I use is a pear deck. It's a really great technology, maximizes engagement. It also allows students to put in their answers anonymously, and then I can show their answers anonymously. So I feel like I've gotten this incredible peek behind the curtain over the last decade that lets me see what they're really thinking and feeling. Like, if you really knew me, you'd know the answer to that question. What does vulnerability mean to you? And the answers to these questions are really revealing about what's going on inside them. And I think it's, for most of them, they all walk away feeling like, oh my God, I didn't know that's what the college essay process could be. I didn't think that, I've never done this before. This is so wild to me, because there's no room, there's no place for it in our educational environment. And so that's what I'm doing as a teen life coach. It's much more than just the private coaching. It's really about providing a framework, a curriculum that guides them on a journey deeper and deeper into knowing themselves, understanding themselves.
Okay, I definitely. So I want to dive into that sort of step by step. But first, I just want to pause on the phrase that you, or the statement you just made, which is to kind of the purpose of this is to make them more efficient at life. I mean, that's pretty awesome, right? I mean, we all sort of need that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, can you take me into, I'm a 15-year-old girl, and need some teen life coaching. What is this? What's this look and feel like for me? What's the framework like and the steps?
Well, first of all, I think about the 7 pillars of mental health. So my 7 pillars of mental health are emotional awareness and agility. That's number 1. So giving them an understanding of why they feel what they feel. How do I interpret what I feel? What are the messages my feelings are providing me? That is the first module of my HeartSpeak program. And I do some version of this, journey in private coaching as well. But it's so important to start there because they think that what they feel is truth. They don't know how to interpret the emotional body because they've been educated in it. And it's just this like thing that we don't address, that we're emotional creatures that need to be able to navigate those emotions more effectively than we do in our culture right now, clearly, right? And then the next pillar of mental health is understanding limiting beliefs. So understanding you are not what you think. You have thoughts. Let's look at those thoughts. So I think of all this as connected. It's not separate. So when I have a student who's feeling a certain way, one of the first questions I ask them is, what's the thought before the feeling? I had a mentor ask me this question a very long time ago when I was going through my own mental health. I've applied everything I bring my students through. I've brought myself through. So I know it works. And I find that when they begin to ask questions, I'm giving them agency over their own inner world. So they don't feel like they're a victim to it. They don't feel like it's just happening to them. It's like now they have an action to take. I've been an actor. I've studied theater, and in a scene, for instance, a basic principle of drama is choose a verb, choose something you want to do in the scene. Otherwise, you're going to be floundering around, and the scene is going to be an unstructured mess. And you're going to be like, what happened? Well, you weren't doing anything. You weren't taking any action to move the momentum forward. So I find that this process of self-inquiry is so much about giving them agency to go, oh, all I have to do is ask the right questions. I have a series of 10 inner education questions. Inner education is my philosophy. And through that process, my students, they all have it on like a Post-it note, and whenever they're feeling something, they pick one of those questions, and it gives them greater insight into why they're feeling what they're feeling. So that's the two basic pillars, the foundations: thought, feeling. And then we go into the modalities, the tools: meditation and breath work, body image. We get into self-care, managing stress, nutrition, biohacking, boundaries, sexuality, consent, pleasure is the 6th. And the 7th is financial literacy. So I think of all of these as like a comprehensive crash course. I mean, it's
In
like
life.
Everything I wish I had known in life. Yeah.
Right.
And it's not just the external tools of financial literacy either. It's like, what were you taught about money? What were the messages you received in your family about money? How do you what are the habits and the behaviors around money? So it's helping them understand that everything in our outer world is a result of our inner world. And that we have to go to the root of our inner world in order to change our experience in the outer world.
So, I think one thing that goes on a lot in traditional brick and mortar schools is that mental health is sort of seen as either a kind of add-on to education, not core to it. And similarly, like a Band-Aid, something that you have to apply to some kids in some situations because something's broken, right? I got a feeling those don't apply to your approach, right? You're seeing this as
No.
kind of a core piece of education and development, that this is like,
Yeah.
you're taking your algebra, your ELA, your Latin, whatever it is. And then, oh, by the way, here's a course on yourself and on like some life skills, right?
I love that. I'm going to use that. A course on your, absolutely. That is
It's like a
precisely what I'm doing. Yeah.
user's manual, how to get along.
Yeah.
Sounds absolutely fantastic.
How to maximize your life, how do
Right.
we maximize our life? Like, I think a great example is this. I'm working with a student right now. She's in ninth grade and she's so smart, so capable. But she's very afraid and resistant to getting involved or getting interested in anything. And so we're looking at what's going on underneath that resistance. What's going on? What are the thoughts, fears, beliefs, ideas that prevent someone from pursuing the things they're genuinely interested and passionate about, whether that's comparing yourself to students at school, whether that's feelings like most of my students are feeling crushed under their own self-doubt. So that's the number one problem I see with students. And then they are just frozen. And it's like parents are like, well, do this, do that, but they can't take action because they haven't resolved the root cause of what's holding them back. And it's like, we're missing opportunities here with these kids. I mean, I think kids right now are capable of doing so much. There are kids in the world that are doing incredible things, starting businesses, creating major change in the world at such a young age. And I think that, I think that the sooner we give kids this kind of education into themselves, a course on yourself, the sooner they can just get to work, living their life and pursuing the things that are interesting to them and being a force for good in a world that desperately needs change makers right now. Desperately.
I'll
I see
second
this as
that
a
for
part of
sure.
a bigger shift. Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
going to ask you, like what kind of trends you're seeing, but I think you tackled that. I mean, it sounds like the big trend you're seeing is that there's a lot of kids who are, I think you put it, crushed under their own self-doubt, which is just sounds horrible.
And they're so young. They're so young and they're feeling this way.
Right. Another thing that I hear a lot from parents and also from educators in Cicero and elsewhere is that kids have lost or right now are struggling with a sense of agency, and agency is kind of control over my environment. Can you sort of, is this something you're seeing? Can you kind of speak to that? Does that connect with being crushed by self-doubt in some way?
Yeah, I think in the traditional school environment doesn't honor agency. It's like, okay, sit in the classroom. We're going to give you these exercises and these things to do. We're going to tell you what content you're going to learn. We're going to structure the project for you and you're going to just do it. And I think that what that does is it destroys any form of creativity that would actually get kids engaged in their own learning process. And also the money that's being left on the table as a college coach. It's like, I meet with these kids, I'm like, what's the weirdest, most unusual thing about you? Because that's what's going to stand out in a college essay, the uncommon topics. And unfortunately, they get all shoved into the most common topics, the most common subjects. Everyone's doing the same thing instead of letting these kids fit, like, okay, here's the structure. Let's fill in the content in terms of, fill in the content that you're interested in, that you're drawn to, that you would like to learn about, that would motivate you to learn these concepts and frameworks and, educational mechanisms. So it's like, it's like the students that I work with have to work overtime. The ones that are really motivated, they have to work overtime to get engaged in the unusual subjects and the really interesting things that they're going to end up writing about on their essays outside of school versus using school for actually exploring the things that genuinely interest them. So it's just,
Right.
unfortunately, everyone's being forced into a uniform box, and that's exactly what doesn't work. As we move into higher education and into the world, it like niche is where it's at, niche.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's always a struggle. So what I do is like my college essay technique. It's like, okay, everyone's got common topics for the most part. Okay, let's make uncommon connections, uncommon values. So like, instead of like, I want to be a doctor because I want to help people, I want to be a doctor because it's about social justice, or I want to be a doctor because it connects, because art is a form of medicine making. But how is a kid going to get to those ideas unless they begin to examine their values, unless they begin to look within? They can't get to those uncommon connections. So a lot of what we're doing in the 6 months I'm working, the 4 to 6 months I work with my students, is like, I take them on a personal development journey because we need to build those uncommon connections in order to write an essay that actually stands out, that actually gives them a shot at, you know, getting through admissions, the different pools of admissions. So, you know, it all connects. It's all connected.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah,
All right.
it's
So
really
we
cool.
talked a bit about your, your essay writing business, and then also the multi-week program, HeartSpeak. You've just barely mentioned private personal coaching. And I think that's a thing that some Cicero families might be looking for, because we have a lot of, families who are like world schoolers or homeschoolers. They're kind of cobbling together a lot of different things. They're making their own school, right? And so now
Yeah.
they're looking for a kind of mental health component, a sort of life skills component. And they, might enroll in HeartSpeak, but their schedules might not allow it, and they might want something private. Can you talk a little bit about what your private practice looks like?
Private practice is very much tailored to the individual student. So I like to take my students very similarly through the same modalities and exercises I take my HeartSpeak students. I don't deviate. I don't think there's a need for deviation from what's working, the curriculum that's working. But it's much more tailored to like, okay, personality assessments, strengths. It's much more focused on, okay, how are you living and demonstrating your values, and brainstorming uncommon extracurriculars, uncommon projects, getting them excited about upskilling, learning new things, engaging in their own learning in a way that is really giving them ahead, getting them ahead of most other kids who aren't doing this work yet, who don't, who are in more traditional environments. So I use the same techniques, for self-inquiry. And I take them on a journey and a process, just as I would take my HeartSpeak students through emotional agility, through the mind, overcoming obstacles, shifting limiting beliefs, and, utilizing the principles of inner education, which is ask questions, activating your ability to choose amid struggle. It's a superpower, right? Example questions, like I said, is like, what's the story I'm telling myself? What's the thought before the feeling? The second principle is yourself and your stories are separate. So connecting the cause, the story, to the emotion and the feeling. So what it does when we do this is it releases a load of good vibe chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine, and it alters our moods, our attitudes, and it genuinely supports emotional agility. The third thing is choosing again. So if we've chosen a thought or a feeling that produces suffering or a negative outlook, we choose again. We flip it. What would be the positive version of this? Do-overs are always an option. And the fourth principle is look for the good. So whatever situation we're in, we ask ourselves, like, what is the situation asking us to develop in ourselves? And how can we take steps in that direction? So it's about inner work, which a lot of people consider very woo-woo, but my focus and my emphasis is like, okay, look within, and then what action are you going to take? Because from my perspective and in my experience, you can't change a belief without taking action. You can't change an idea or a thought or something limiting, that's a limited program in your mind about yourself, until you take an action that directly is acting in opposition. So that's how you shift your mind. You identify it, you become aware of it, and then you take opposite action that produces a new thought, a new feeling, and acting as if. So it's a pretty comprehensive, like, mind training program. Essentially, my empowerment teen life coaching is really about mind training and life training. And how do you produce real transformation? How do you produce real changes in your life? Because it doesn't come without taking massive action. and being willing to
Yeah.
take massive action. And it doesn't have to
God,
be, it can be little steps, it can be little action too, but consistent little action.
you know, it reminds me of that super popular book, Mindset by Carol Dweck, right? You know, it's almost like this is a crash course in how to hack your own mindset and your growth mindset and you know,
Absolutely.
it's something valuable our whole lives, but like to get an early start on that at ninth grade and start really doing that work, it's
I
pretty,
wish I'd had it.
right. These
I
kids,
just
what
done
a
like a
fun.
decade.
I always look at my kids. I go, "You guys are rotten. You're living a great life."
Right?
Cool. Kate, this is great. So before we wrap up, can you just sort of tell us, you know, tell whoever's watching, how do they find you?
Cool. Yes. So there are 3 ways to find me. HeartSpeak.school. That's the program. So you can find the whole curriculum. You can sign up there. We have 2 start dates. So we have a HeartSpeak summer starting on August 16th. So we only have 8 spots open. So the sooner you check that out, the sooner you can sign up and save your seat. The third thing is the private coaching. So if you go to HeartSpeak.school and you go to coaching, it's all really easily navigatable. You can sign up for a single session, but I also offer packages so we can go a little bit deeper and create a little bit of a rhythm. And then the third thing is I offer free community, because the one thing HeartSpeak taught me is that this can't be a stop and it can't be, you know, in a finite program. It has to be, it's a part of an ongoing education. It's part of an ongoing connection with other young women. So a big challenge that young women have, especially, is they feel like there's an inauthenticity with friend groups, and there's a lot of ostracization and gossiping and fallouts that happen as they do. And so what this is offering is girls a space for finding common ground, starting friendships and connections and relationships off at a baseline that's a lot more authentic and a lot deeper than you would traditionally have in school and your peer groups. And I do a lot of group work in HeartSpeak as well. So my focus is really about sharing group work and getting people connected and engaged with each other. That's really, versus like me, it is very academic. There is like a short lecture, but most of my emphasis in HeartSpeak is getting them to engage with each other and take each other through these processes, these exercises, these self-inquiry work. So those are the 3 ways you can find me: through the HeartSpeak School program, which starts August 16th, private coaching, and the free community, which if you go to heartspeak.school/community, you can register there. And we do that monthly, every 3rd Thursday of the month. Cool. So that's how you can find me. Yeah.
Great. Well, wherever we post this, we'll post all that stuff so people can just click and go. Awesome. Kate, this is great. I'm so glad to have you, you know, chat with me about this, and also to partner up with you. I think there'll be a lot of Cicero families and kids who would be interested in this.
Awesome. I'm so excited to partner up with you too. This was great. Thanks so much, Paul.
See ya.